the group.
Just have a selectman on the group.
Yeah.
And in general, Bob's been stating his support at the public selectmen's meetings. So it seems like he'd be a good candidate. Maybe he'll just show up. Maybe no. One thing we should discuss is whether or not we're going to hold a meeting next month. Town meeting and so on. I mean, it doesn't conflict with anything this year for once.
Well, last year we did, but years past we haven't.
Yeah. And this year it's a whole week before, basically, the town meeting. Unusually so we certainly could.
Right, it would be the 8th, and when's town meeting? Is it the next week?
It's the 15th. Because it usually is after voting, and so the voting is the 13th.
I mean,
All right, so the voting would be the second Tuesday.
Yeah.
unless something were to come in, a subdivision or something like that.
Well, right, good point.
We wouldn't have much. I don't think we'd be doing much with the housing at that point until after town meeting when we know for sure.
Yep. Yep,
what
good
the
point.
plan is.
Those things are getting fancier and fancier, aren't they?
No, they're the ones
Are your dress crutches?
version 2, they're the protect the elbow brushes.
Aha, excellent.
For call to order. Back after. So, Betsy, Sarah, Chris, Scott. That's it.
Yeah.
And we can need, you probably have to go. Any comment on the minutes?
Move we accept them as written.
A second?
I'll second.
Any comment before we vote? All in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Any matters not on the agenda?
I guess not.
Not a lot of people here.
Well, I mean, one of us could have something. Actually, I do have something real quickly. We're putting together a steering committee for the housing, to work with the housing consultant. And sort of the planning board that went out to get the grant, it's the board of selectmen that sort of technically, signed for the grant. How does appointing a steering committee work? I mean, what body does that? How does that formation occur?
Is there anything written in the grant materials that say?
No,
No.
that's up to us.
Well, if we're the ones who are going to be running the show, then I would think we would be.
Because there's sort of three different involved groups. There's the planning board, the board of selectmen, and then J-Home, the housing group in Jackson. And, we're hoping that they're going to be members on the steering committee from all three groups. But I just want to make sure that we put together that steering committee in the right way so that at some later point someone
Right.
doesn't say, well, that's not even an authorized committee because it was not done this way or that way. I just wasn't sure how a committee like that gets appointed.
Treading new ground.
Um,
Setting precedent.
I know we've had subcommittees of the planning board that have addressed things like the capital improvements program and things like that. I would assume it's very much like that. I mean, we are authorized by both the selectmen and the planning board. Actually, that's a great question to make certain about.
I would think that even if we put it together, but then get input from each of the other twos to make sure that
Mhm.
all three are represented and all three have had a say in as to the makeup of the group.
And how many are we shooting for, Betsy?
Between 12 and 15 apparently is the ideal
Wow.
number.
Okay.
That's a lot.
Well, I mean, 12 or 15 means 7 or 8 or 9 will show up on any particulars. And it's really, I think it's going to be the consultant essentially leading
Right.
this charge. And
Right.
so I don't see a real problem with having a larger group. I think that just, pulls more information into, what the consultant is going to do. I think for the most part, it'll be the consultant that.
Is Jackson the only town that is doing this in the valley?
In the valley, yes.
So we could make it almost valley-wide. Don't know if that makes sense. Or is that the
Well,
purview of the housing?
Yeah, the focus, at least the stated focus is going to be to make something happen, or to investigate the opportunity to make something happen in Jackson. I know that, the Housing Coalition, is going to be very interested in how all this works because if, it seems to go well, they're going to want to replicate, the same thing either on a valley-wide basis or maybe more particularly town by town. The Housing Coalition is our fiscal agent, and so we've been meeting with them, and that's what we discussed in the last meeting, was how, this all kind of makes sense. The Housing Coalition is a valley-wide organization, but really isn't set up to do much on the ground, in a particular community. And so having them be sort of an umbrella organization and then having, hopefully multiple smaller groups town by town that the Housing Coalition provides resources to, acts as a fiscal agent, etc. That seemed to be a pretty good structure. I'm not necessarily opposed to having someone not from Jackson
Okay.
on it, but
Yeah,
I think-
I was just thinking of it because this really is a regional
for sure, yeah.
regional problem, and
Well,
it may be that Jackson is not the best location for the wide scale affordable housing.
Yeah, and it depends on I guess as I see it, there's really, there's sort of 3 points to this effort, in terms of different types of housing. There's workforce housing, which that's probably where Jackson is going to have the least opportunity in terms of it being possible and acceptable in town. I mean, I don't see. And it depends. Workforce is a pretty vague term.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about transient employees that are working at the hospitals, the restaurants and hotels, and are likely to to move on in a fairly short period of time. I don't see. We're hoping to create more rental properties, but there's really not many apartments in Jackson. I certainly don't see an apartment building going up in
Right.
Jackson. Other than maybe out in Dana Place or something like that. But
That's sort of away from the whole center of activity, things that are happening. I mean,
Right.
think more of an apartment building right down in Conway.
yeah,
North
But
Conway.
if we had 4 housing units in the first 3 years or something or other, and then another 6 housing units the next 3 years or something or other, it wouldn't make a major change in Jackson as we know it, but it would allow younger families or alternative.
And there's also workforce in terms of the teachers in town, the police officers in town, the firemen in town, the road crew in town.
Right, so
and that starts to overlap with that more young family housing that probably is, at least personally, is what I most like to see, is to just bring in younger families, make sure that we have a good community of children in town, And then the opposite end of that is, whatever we can do to allow people to stay in Jackson as they age. Really that's where you start to, create a community that, matches the physical aspect of the town in terms of it being, a beautiful community. But, workforce housing, sort of that classic workforce housing of, lots of apartments for service
Lots of
employees.
ways of working.
That is certainly a desperate need valley-wide. And there are restaurants that closed down whole sections this summer because they just could not find employees, and primarily because employees of that nature can't find housing in this area. Try to get any subcontract type work done, plumbing or electrical work, or those guys can't find anybody. And there's some other issues, going on with that, but it's there are businesses that are not doing as well as they could simply because they can't find the staff. And in turn, it means that when we go to restaurants, we either can't get in, or we wait a lot longer, or if we need to get a faucet fixed, we're going to wait a lot longer. So it impacts even those that have housing. That's sort of strange. The question of how do we appoint a steering committee, but
Well, just thinking about it, I mean, it really is a whole valley program or problem, and I would think that maybe if you're going to have 12 people on the committee, you might try to get some feedback from maybe the majority are from Jackson, but in selectmen and planning board and whatever. But you might maybe see if representatives of the other towns might be interested in joining it, because again, there's no way that Jackson alone could possibly solve the valley problem.
we're not going to solve the valley problem, but we do hope to have some impact on the Jackson problem. Right. But it's certainly, if Victoria were interested in,
The Housing Coalition has been in effect for about 10 or 12 years, and it is gradually getting increased awareness throughout the valley about the need, and part of it is that finally a lot of employers have realized this is significantly affecting me and my business.
Right.
And so it seems to us that one of the things that could be effective is if Jackson, the town of Jackson has hired this planning consultant, and if over a 4-month period or an 8-month period or whatever, we as a group come up with 2 or 3 ideas on ways we can start trying to make it happen, that we get a few low-cost housing units in, or a few housing units suitable for young families or whatever, more than what we have now, then maybe other towns will say, hey, look at that study that Jackson did. Would that work here? And so it might work. And one of the things that we've done is we're working directly with the Housing Coalition, so that we've set up a fundraising element there that's specifically for Jackson. It's a way that we can have private fundraising that will cover our match, just in case the town, at town meeting, there might be some people speaking out against it, and they might sway public opinion saying this isn't what we want. We want to close off any growth right at the bridge, the covered bridge, and not have anything else, extraneous coming in here. And so, as Scott was figuring, if we have people who have fundraised to be able to make the match individually without taking any or maybe not much money from the town, that it would be much harder for people to say, I'm going to vote against it because I really don't want other people here. I just want the nice elite people such as me. And so...
Again, I think the issue is, do we do it and then show everybody that we've done it, or do we do it and show people as we are doing it? And that's maybe where people from another town would come in.
Well, do you think Victoria would be interested in being on the steering committee? Having a direct link to the Housing Coalition wouldn't, just like having a board, selectmen here at the planning board meetings.
Well, originally in our little group, as I understood it, we said we wanted to have it exclusively people who either lived or worked in Jackson.
I mean, the consultant is going, his approach is going to be mostly regulatory. So he's going to look at our zoning, and it wouldn't even be part of the purview of the project to look at other towns' zoning.
Right.
So, I think
You go either way.
making sure that what we do is available to other towns, and perhaps in a way that's available, and they don't have to wait till we're finished to see what's going on. But and I think we would. My personal opinion is we would give some preference to Jackson residents so far as being on the committee. These will be public meetings, so there's certainly no reason why anyone from any town can't sit in, and I'm sure we will invite comment. If we're having trouble filling out the committee like we want, then looking further afield, certainly. I don't see that it would be harmful necessarily. I'm just not sure that what we would be doing or what the consultant would be doing would be directly pertinent to people from other towns with different zoning.
I don't feel strongly about it one way or another, but just trying to sound it out, so to speak.
I think the difficulty is the Housing Coalition, for example, has enough trouble getting people to come to workshops and meetings and so on. A lot of people maybe really don't understand it. They think, okay, workforce housing, that means Section 8, that means the federal government's going to come in and regulate who's going to... No. So if Jackson explores it, certainly, as Scott says, we wouldn't be excluding anybody, but if we explore it and come up with some good ideas, other towns might take advantage of that.
Okay. Right, do you want to move on to rules of procedure? I think at the last one we pretty much got through the whole document, right? So it's a matter of, when I read through the edited version, and it all seemed what we discussed, but has everyone had an opportunity to go through it?
Yeah, I have one suggestion for a sentence to be added that didn't get added. And I don't know whether it's because I didn't mention it or because...
Well, it's certainly possible that the person who typed up the editing missed something.
I can't believe that.
No. It has to do with Article 6,
Okay,
number 2, talking about special meetings.
okay.
And I had, it says, and provided, on the second line, that provided public notice to each member, and I would think, public notice to each member, it's more of it. There is notice to the public and then also to each member. So I would have just added, saying provided public notice and notice to each member at least 48 hours in advance. And then,
So I'm sorry, it would say provided public notice to the public and to each member?
just public notice and notice to each member.
Okay.
Because
Public notice
Public
to
notice.
a member is not.
that doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Then there's just a typo. There's 2 N's in at the end of that.
2 eyes.
2 I's.
Oh, good, thank you.
2 N's. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
It looks like an N without my...
There are 2 ends in the end.
Great.
Okay, and then I was going to add, the sentence I was going to add was that no business shall be acted upon at a special meeting unless a quorum is present.
That's in number 4.
That's a quorum, but this is a quorum for regular meetings.
So where does it fit then?
This would be for a special meeting,
So part of number 2.
part of number 2.
Okay. The notice shall specify the purpose of the meeting.
And then no business shall be acted upon. at a special meeting unless a quorum is present.
Okay. Okay, good.
And then back on the first page, there in number 5, can you read me what you want it to be? Because it looks as though there's maybe the cross out and the additions.
So where it says Article 5, officers, the officers of the board shall be as follows, is that what you're saying?
No, number up in Article 4.
Okay.
Number 5.
Number 5 of Article 4. Let's say, they shall be allowed to participate in the matter? Or
Okay.
should it be able to participate in the deliberation of the matter, as the general public may?
They participate in the board in a limited capacity, and that they shall not be allowed to make or second motions, and in that during a public hearing they shall be allowed to participate as the general public may. I think matter should have been crossed out.
Or do you want it, shall be able to...
Oh, in the matter as the...
in the deliberations of the matter, on the matter, or just...
No,
just without the matter?
in the matter was what they... we crossed out board's deliberation and... I think I misprinted. It was manner rather than matter.
Okay. And they
okay.
shall be allowed to participate in the manner as the...
As the general public. And then whether or not we have
Would it not
may.
be a little more straightforward to say just to be allowed to participate as a member of the general public?
Yeah, that would be...
Okay.
Allowed to participate as a member of the general public. That's nice and clear.
Great, thank you.
And the only other thing I have is a
Because
title.
we actually used that wording in Article 4 or 5, and 6, 5. When we say as a member of the general public, may participate as a member of the general public. Yeah, it's consistent with that.
Right, in disqualifications, yeah, it's the same situation, but coming at it in a different direction. Just a typo in the very last page,
Okay.
Article 16, the one I read down the bottom. Next to last line, you've got a comma there.
Oh.
I'm sure it's supposed to be a may.
Yep.
Slip of the finger down.
Great.
Now, we say in amendments that these rules of procedure may be amended by the majority of the vote, and the board shall hold a public hearing prior to the adoption of new rules or amendment of existing rules. So do we have to hold a public hearing on this?
I think think it sure wouldn't hurt. It doesn't say, at the beginning that it was done at a public hearing. Well, actually, let me look up 676.1 and see what that says.
Is the copy of the original bylaws I have looks like it's pre-computer. Or back very, very early computer.
It just says the rules of procedures shall be adopted at a regular meeting of the board and shall be placed on file with the city, town, village, district clerk, etc.
And what RSA is that?
That's 676.1. So no, it doesn't say that it has to be
Good.
done, but it sure wouldn't hurt to say in our agenda that we'll be voting on these rules of adoption and welcome to be reviewed at a public hearing or something like that.
Or maybe just have it as a public hearing on it, notice it that way, and if anybody wants to.
Sure
and
wouldn't
then
hurt.
Copies are available
Okay.
in the town office or digitally or however we want to do it. And just have that on agenda, anything else.
It is funny that we say that we'll amend it at a public hearing. That was a good thing to look into.
So if the new rules say that we will amend in a public hearing, but the old rules didn't, do we need to do a public hearing to adopt the new rules?
Just thinking all the time.
I mean, what actually qualifies as amending? I mean, fine tuning, is that amending?
Well, they say if it's nothing substantive, let's say that we left out a comma or, something fairly insignificant, that we call that housekeeping.
Yeah, I mean, unless I'm missing something, there was no material changes in here.
Well, but we've never adopted these in the first place. We had bylaws, and so this will be the
Who
first.
knows? Who knows if the bylaws were done with a public hearing? And if they were, I would be surprised if all of the people that attended that public hearing are still with us today.
And we know when we adopt subdivision regulations and we have a public hearing for it, we're lucky to see anybody other than a planning board member.
Depends.
We're lucky?
So we've had the room before a couple of times.
Okay.
But on other matters.
Yeah, probably not subdivision.
Yeah.
Yeah, subdivision's pretty cut and dry and boring.
So I guess we will wait until a public hearing to vote to accept these.
Is it a public hearing or just a public notice that these are available
Well,
for comment?
if it's a public notice, then it's
You can call a public hearing, and, I mean, like, this could, if it had been properly noticed, we could have a public hearing with just the four of us, nobody else. And as long as it's been noticed, then.
Right, then nobody has grounds to complain. They might still complain.
They can complain all they want, but if they want to have an effect, they're gonna come to the meeting.
Yeah. And join the board, maybe.
None of them are going to
Maybe
complain.
Okay, so I guess if you wouldn't mind making those
Great.
couple amendments and then
Yep, I'm glad to.
thank you, doing all the work on it.
Okay.
So the next item is the conflict of interest.
So I think we basically agreed with this, but we were going to vote it at the January meeting, and then I forget why we didn't, but we didn't.
We just spent all the time on it.
Okay. So I brought it again, but I figured if I only had the signing sheet, people would say, "What am I signing?" So,
Well, the only suggestion I was going to have,
okay.
is sort of in line with what we were just talking about in the second paragraph, where it says, any blah, 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 financial property shall not participate in any discussion, hearing, or other consideration by the planning board that involves that property.
Great.
But it seems like they should be able to participate as a member of the public, like any other member of the public could.
Great. So,
Okay, so not participate
So,
as a member of the planning board.
As a planning board member.
Or shall not participate except as a member of the public in any discussion, hearing, or consideration.
So-
Either way.
Or as a voting member of the planning board, which puts them into the public domain.
they say that you, I think state law is that you have to literally remove yourself from the table.
Okay.
Which we kind of discussed at the last meeting, is not, for our particular situation, there's not much difference between sitting at the table and sitting
Right.
10 feet away. At a much larger, larger community where there's a table up on stage, whatever. It might be a little bit more. I don't think sitting there or sitting here is going to influence the discussion any more or less.
So would we say except as a member of the general public right after property, or put it at a different spot?
What I would suggest is they shall not participate as a planning board member in any discussion, hearing,
Okay.
consideration by the planning board which involves the property. However, they may participate as a member of the general public.
Perfect.
Because you would have, at subdivision, you would have people who have an interest in it. We've got the guys that are presenting the application. Then you have other people there who would have useful information for the planning board to make their decision.
And if you were in a butter to a property, you should have the ability to speak
Mm-hmm.
to the.
Great.
So that was the only thing I.
Super.
Anything else?
Just one.
Good thought. So we'll have that for March 8th.
And while you're at it, third paragraph from the bottom, the board shall designate as alternate, should be a capital A,
Oh, thank you. Good.
alternate before that. And then in the last paragraph where you say involves potential conflict of interest, at the time this conflict of interest is adopted, conflict of interest policy.
Oh, okay, great.
Policy is adopted, not
You bet.
conflict.
Okay, let's see.
It seemed odd to me that sort of grandfathering you in for a period of time, in a way. And that's basically saying that you can, if we adopted these today,
Oh, wait a minute. Pursuant of 3139A. Comes the book again.
if I read that correctly, it means that if
That you can have your conflict of interest for another year.
Right. I mean, this is sort of saying that there's already some ongoing discussion that a planning board member is part of that would be qualified as a conflict of interest, but they can continue to be part of that discussion for up to a year. But I just,
And that really doesn't make sense for us because we don't have something in process now where somebody would be feeling.
Yeah, actually, I would be in favor of just knocking that out.
Yeah.
I just don't see the rationale behind letting someone continue.
This seems to be written by somebody for whom that would be.
A benefit.
An axe to grind.
And I'm wondering, usually people talk about it as a conflict of interest statement rather than policy. How do we want to phrase it? I mean, up at the top where it says conflict of interest, it ought to be policy or statement or something.
Yeah, I agree.
Policies sound more like something that you're, that you're
that you'll adhere to, okay.
Statement sounds a little bit more like this is our intent. I mean, it does say that there can be a vote, if someone is participating in discussion and other members feel that that's not appropriate, then the board can vote to recuse that person, but ultimately the person has to recuse themselves. That vote is advisory.
Is that what we're saying here? Read it again.
When uncertainty arises, I think it's in that one. Any said in a couple sentences down, any such requests and votes shall be made prior to or at the commencement of any required public hearing. Such vote will be advisory and non-binding and may not be requested by persons other than board members except as provided by local ordinance. It sounds like we can vote to advise someone to recuse themselves, but ultimately they need to recuse themselves. It sort of makes it sound a bit like a statement.
Right, okay, but then that says, if the member or alternate is disqualified or unable to act, or recuses him or herself.
Not sure.
How do you get to be
Disqualified.
disqualified?
Or unable to act. I don't know.
Right. So why would you be disqualified? You'd be disqualified because you have conflict of interest.
Right.
Well, it may be you can recuse yourself for reasons other than the financial or private gain. There may be some other, you may have some other ties.
Betsy, do you have another copy of that?
Um,
I'm not.
Here, you can have that. I've got it.
I'm not sure what the unable to act is,
Somebody's in jail.
but then they would be at the meeting.
That's what I mean, yeah.
I mean,
Right, you're unable to act because you're not there, and then that's then the chair designates an alternate.
right, but that's covered in the rules. And it doesn't sound like a conflict of interest.
Chris, let me switch with you because of my notes on that thing.
Where did this language come from?
It was in one of the state. I don't know. I was wondering if it was in this new booklet, but I don't see it in there. So it was definitely in one of the things I got in the state that we ought to be doing.
I guess the other question would be, if it's true that someone, vote by the board is non-binding, the planning board member, decides not to recuse themselves, how does that, and then somebody decides that what the planning board did was, they have a problem with whatever the planning board decision that was made, in part because they felt there was someone on,
Right, because
voting that was should have been.
and if it's not a unanimous vote,
What's
and their vote made.
what's the
What do you do
legal?
Then the planning board would get sued by somebody.
Right.
But it would seem odd that an individual on the planning board could force the planning board into that
Yeah.
sort of situation.
The wording basically is coming out of 673:14.
And that references 676:1,
Right, which I read a moment ago.
but I don't see anything about. Oh, adopted by the procedural rule. So I guess we could have a procedural rule that allows someone other than a board member to request a vote. That's how that runs. I'm not sure if maybe if someone, if the planning board gets to a point where they vote to ask, vote that someone should be part of the discussion, then obviously the person in question is to some degree not willing to recuse themselves. If they simply accept the vote, maybe then they're technically disqualified as opposed to recusing themselves.
I got a feeling that this, when uncertainty arises, that's the application of these specific provisions. In other words, it's some sort of fuzzy area. And a person who is potentially a conflict of interest feels that, in this fuzzy area that he's not, and somebody is out to get him and trying to get him off the board, and he feels that whatever they're saying is either false or immaterial to it. And that, you can then bring it to the board, and the board can vote, and if he really feels strongly that this is he doesn't have a conflict of interest, then he wouldn't recuse himself.
Right. So it does say that the vote's advisory, so if somebody's sitting here and we say, you own the property right next to there, you shouldn't be able to vote, and the guy says, I really should be able to vote, as I read it, we can't say, get the hay out of the room or whatever. We're just saying we think it's unadvisable for you to be here, and it might eventually get to court, and then it turned out that the planning board said it's not right for this person to sit here, and that would be a factor in the court decision, I would think.
Well, it would work against the planning board at that point in time, I would think, because the court would say, okay, well, the rest of the board felt this wasn't appropriate. I mean, it's not, in a court, it's going to be the town, the planning board, that is the defendant.
Mm-hmm.
And if the rest of the board showed that they didn't feel it was appropriate to a vote for someone to participate anyhow, then I would think, a lawyer in the court was going to say, well, look, the whole board, and that one person voted to say that they shouldn't be part of the discussion, so,
You mean, and why didn't the board say you can't be here?
Well, to me, it's sort of a conundrum. If the person can be here, whether we say no or not, but it still seems like in a court, it's going to work for the other side if there's a record of the rest of the board voting to not allow that person to participate. So I think it would only support the argument that whatever the board ultimately did is on shaky ground.
Because
Because-
the person who sat in the seat as a disqualified member but wasn't really disqualified. So it was 6 board members saying such and such and the disqualified.
Right. I mean, if I were, the property owner and I felt that the decision the board made was wrong, and in part it was wrong because someone was part of the discussion and voted, for the decision that I'm not in agreement with, and I felt that was, that person had a conflict of interest. I just think that the fact that the rest of the board also felt the same way would work against, would work for, the person with a grievance, because clearly then that person shouldn't have been part of the discussion or shouldn't have been allowed to vote.
Well, but it's interesting
But we
that
don't have the power to not allow them, so.
And then they talk about being disqualified.
Right, and that
As if,
that sounds like the result of the vote.
well, disqualified in that, it's clear that he has financial interest in the property, or is involved in grants or contracts made to. So it seems to be that there's some cut and dried circumstances where you would be disqualified and it wouldn't be a vote. I mean, it's obvious that you're disqualified whether you agree to it or not. If you agree to the situation, yes, I own that property.
Yeah.
Then
So maybe it's just when it's not cut and dry, and they do say in situations where there's uncertainty.
right, and what they're doing is the vote is on the question of whether that member alternate should be disqualified.
So here, the notes to decisions, it talks about a particular case where somebody was not disqualified, but at the conclusion of the meeting, the chairman had no concern, that the other members had no concern about the alleged bias of the other member was supported by the record. And then the trial court did not err in failing to find that the planning board member should have recused himself or been disqualified for bias, where the only allegation that concerned the member's alleged bias as plaintiff's request to cut trees was that he moved to deny the request. His motion was not evidence of prejudgment, but of judgment exercised at the appropriate time and place. So that's not really what Scott's talking about, I think, but
So that was a case that he did not recuse himself, and
made a motion.
he made a motion, and that was taken to court, and the court decided in whose favor. Wade through the legalese.
I don't see that it says.
But didn't it also say that the rest of the board felt that there was not a conflict of interest?
Yeah. And then it goes on to say a planning board member's discovery of obvious inconsistencies and submitted documents. Okay, that doesn't really do it. It's all about prejudgment.
Now, I think I agree with you, Sarah, that there's situations where you're just automatically disqualified.
Yeah.
You're in a butter to the property, it's being discussed, disqualified, period.
You're providing the loan for it.
Right. So there's that to me would be a disqualification. There's also recusing yourself, and I guess not able to act. So I guess then you could just say that, again, someone recusing themselves has to be done voluntarily.
True.
And in situations where there's uncertainty. So there was a point where someone in town was very concerned about what we were doing in terms of site development, or site work, and wrote a letter saying that I should recuse myself from the discussion, particularly because I was the chair at the time, because this person felt that I was doing or had done site work that was impacting his property in a negative way. But in any case, felt that I should recuse myself from the discussion because I had some sort of conflict of interest regarding the idea of site work. Yeah, personally, I think that site work is something that concerns everybody in town. There's no particular situation, unless I had a major project going on, and what the board was going to do was going to work against that. But that would be a situation where I think there's certainly uncertainty in the sense that at least that individual felt that I should recuse myself.
Yeah, now this is, but it has to be a member of the board.
Right, I'm just saying that's an example of an uncertain situation. It's not that I was an abutter of a property that was being discussed.
You weren't doing the site work yourself.
I hadn't done any site work.
Right. No, but
This is all based on the increasing number of firms that this person was seeing, and that was an indication that there was a lot more drainage coming down off of Black Mountain, even though this person lives at the base of a funnel. But it just, an example of someone feeling that I should recuse myself. So at least in their mind, there's some degree of uncertainty about my participating.
But did the board then vote on that? Because
I'm just using this as an example.
Oh, we did not vote. I don't think anyone on the board or anybody else
Thought
that
that you
felt that there was any particular
so,
situation.
because I understand that it's only the board that can vote for
It's only a board that can vote, but it's also only a board member that can ask for a vote.
right, and even then, it's only an advisory vote.
Right.
So if I
Right.
want to recuse myself, I don't have to. There's no way around that.
Well, if it's a clear cut.
Yeah.
Well, what's clear cut?
Well, it says right in the RSA that it's non-binding.
The vote.
The vote is
Well,
non-binding.
but what Sarah's proposing, and I'm willing to accept it, is that there are certain situations where there doesn't need to be a vote. If you're in a butter to a property, that's being considered for subdivision,
Right.
But
then you're disqualified.
But I could say, wait a minute, I don't want to be disqualified. You got to vote, and you vote to disqualify me, and I say,
If you're in a butter, I don't think there needs to be a vote.
Okay.
You're
No,
simply
this is
disqualified.
when uncertainty arises.
Okay.
In other words, it's not,
Okay.
you're not on record as an owner of that property.
gotcha. Yeah, it's a little confusing.
Where there isn't any evidence, hard evidence of it.
The situation I described where, this person
Gotcha.
said that I was doing site work, and so for me to participate in this discussion about how we were going to regulate site work, they felt that there was a conflict of interest because I would, in their mind, I would push the conversation, especially as a chair, towards whatever site work regulation would benefit me. But everybody in town is, a potential site work doer. So I think everyone in town has interest in.
Okay. So we leave it as it is, and knock off that last 3
Hold
months.
that paragraph.
Yep. And then just add in the second paragraph something about participating as a member of the public.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Looks okay to me. Okay.
Do you want to vote to accept it?
Sure.
Works for me.
Have a motion?
You making a motion?
Well, all right, I'll move that we accept them as amended in those two places, adding participation as a member of the public in the second paragraph and removing the last paragraph.
Great.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Good, we don't have to address it again the next meeting.
Set aside.
Put it aside.
That's what I do.
That's what I like to see, actual
These
action.
things can kind of,
They'll come back.
Oh, they can go on and on and on.
Well,
okay. Any other business?
When I opened up my folder, found the discount of the capital improvements from the 2009 update. Is that something we handed out last week? Or how did I get it? I don't remember.
We did hand,
I've been doing so much else in between since.
yeah, we did
since
hand it out
meeting.
last month, and actually, at the first budget hearing of the selectmen, a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they were discussing the fact that we are not adequately planning for a lot of things that need to be happening. And I said that the planning board has discussed taking up the capital improvements program again, and that ticked off Billy Kelly, who said that the planning board's actions on that are pretty ineffective. And I said that we need to, he said we don't go into enough depth, and I said, okay, so come and help us figure out how we can get into greater depth. And so I think if we are going to do this, we need to start out probably with having a committee, asking some people to join a committee to help us make this happen, and maybe Billy would be one of those people.
Yeah, he was on the last one, and he was the one who was pushing that we should really be putting more money into road repair, like have a capital reserve fund that we keep giving to and taking out of, and doing more than just sort of stopgap repair.
And so that might be something when, during one of the budget hearings or during town meeting or something or other, somebody might stand up and say, we need to get a capital improvements program study in the works, and who wants to join in a committee to help make that happen in the best ways or something.
That or just put something in e-news.
Yeah. But and putting it in e-news certainly is great too, but I think having it said at town meeting where everybody's stewed about the budget, okay, join us and help.
Yeah, join us in that, right. That makes sense.
Is Bill going to moderate this?
I don't know.
I think that would be the most effective way.
It's a good point.
Are we still in session?
Oh,
I think we run out of film, I hope.
The camera just shut off, so I don't know how much was missed.
okay.
Well, the meeting was already over.
Yeah,
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
Second.
All right.
Third, fourth. Right.
Well, I feel good that something was actually totally accomplished.